right, welcome into a Wednesday edition of In Touch with Indiana Sports, powered by HoosierIllustrated.com. John Alden with you, as always, in the middle of the week. Hope you're having a good week so far. The end of the week, for me, at least on this show, as we will not have a show on Friday for the reasons that I mentioned previously, be on our baby moon, my wife and I, so we're looking forward to that. But I'm also looking forward to being here with you for the next several minutes, however long the show ends up being. Going to be kind of a different type of show. I have some plans for the show, but we're really going to be all over the place. And to be honest, like it's going to be sports centric, but this may be the least that I plan on talking Indiana basketball for a majority of the show for quite some time. It doesn't mean that we're not going to hit on it. I believe the most of the Indiana basketball related talk will take place in the segment of the show where I go to YouTube comments, because there's quite a few YouTube comments that I want to get into today, and they're not all Indiana basketball related, but that's probably where most of that side of the conversation will stem from. But we're going to get into a lot of different things. When I say a lot, it's just going to be a few different things, I should say. We're going to talk with Drew Rosenberg of HoosierIllustrated.com today as well, to kind of get a sort of a recap-ish of what happened with the NBA All-Star Weekend, and more so hear his thoughts on really what's going on with the NBA. Because why is it that the National Basketball Association cannot figure out how to not only pique the interest of the fans, but create an entertaining product in a product that the players themselves want to take part in? Because the players in the NBA just half-ass everything. I heard somebody say that the other day, and I think that is about as true of a statement as you can make about what goes on with most of the players in the NBA. For those who know that they aren't going to be competing for a championship this year, and I'm talking kind of outside of the All-Star game now, but in general with the NBA, you get so much, you just get players that, I don't want to say they don't care. I'm trying to avoid saying that, but it seems like they're more concerned about just not getting hurt than they are in playing the game. And I know you don't want to get hurt in any sport, but you see football players hitting each other all the time in the professional, in the NFL, I should say. And yeah, I guess certain teams may tank more so than others, but it's not nearly as obvious in the NFL than it is in the NBA. Either way, we'll save most of this conversation for when Drew shows up on today's show. And then we'll probably do a little Indiana basketball discussion with him while we've got him on here too. And I guess usually when I'm talking about a guest that I'm going to be having on the show, usually I've already recorded the segment with him. That is not the case today. So that's just, I guess, a different flavor once again for this show. But before we dive into anything, let's I want to call this is not something that's going to become a regular segment, but this is something that I stumbled upon on social media the other day, and maybe some of you have seen this already. I'm sure some of you have, because it involves a guy named Rick Pitino. His halftime speech was recorded, and I don't know if this was in any way staged or anything like that, but I'm calling this midweek motivation. Okay, it's Wednesday. Sometimes you need a little bit of a pick-me-up to get you through the rest of the week, and I don't know if it's the motivation that you'll necessarily be expecting. It's more of a, I'll just let Rick Pitino do the talking. I'm going to play this clip right here. It's just under a minute, but I want to play the entire thing for you.
Dig in and be a basketball player. Dig in. Every time you miss a shot, your game deflates. We don't care about your missed shots. Play defense. You guys keep blowing opportunity upon opportunity upon opportunity. You're like children with bad things happening. Instead of digging in and be tougher, you wilt. Where is your toughness? Where have you guys been raised that you're so weak mentally that you just give up when something doesn't go right for you? Don't you know what adversity is all about? That's the game of life, not the game of basketball. You don't get down when things go wrong. You dig in and get tougher. Your whole life's going to be adversity. Learn how to deal with it.
Pitino, Red Storm.
A lot of a lot of hard truths right there, but also a nice little kick in the ass, if you will, if you need that to get you through the rest of your work week, whatever it is that may be holding you back from giving your absolute best. And I need to hear that sometimes. I tend to think that I'm a pretty tough human being, especially for someone in my generation where I feel like there's a lot of people that aren't very tough, if I'm being quite honest. Not that there aren't their fair share of tough people mentally, I'm saying, but we all need to hear that sometimes, because we all get in our own heads. We all tend to think, woe is me with life and that sort of thing. And Rick Pitino, someone who is, of course, no matter what happened at the University of Louisville and, what got him in all that trouble and had his championship vacated, all that stuff, he's still a master motivator, still one of the greatest basketball minds in the history of the college game. And so that went viral after they were playing Providence the other day. And apparently, according to this post, I didn't watch the game, but St. John's was down big time at halftime, and they ended up rallying to win that game. So I don't know how much you credit the victory to what happened in the locker room at halftime, but I'm sure that at least played a bit of a factor in what happened. I'm sure a lot of you are looking at that and hoping like, man, I hope Indiana can find somebody that can light a fire under players' asses whenever things aren't going the way they should, because I know every human being is different. The way they motivate is different. But we all know that Mike Woodson isn't going into the locker room and spewing out anything like that I believe would get people fired up on that level. Maybe I'm wrong, but I'd be willing to bet that's not the case. Now, I probably shouldn't even be really ragging on Woody right now anyway. We all know the writing it's been written. It's even been, it's out in the open. He's retiring. And so all we can do on that front is just hope for the best for the end of this season, and that, things finish strong. And that will, of course, happen this upcoming Sunday, or at least they'll attempt to get things rolling in that regard on Sunday when they face the Purdue Boilermakers for the second time this year, this time at Assembly Hall. And it really does kind of feel like this is really it. If you can't beat Purdue, then we can, for once and for all, eliminate any remaining NCAA tournament hopes that may still be around. I initially said that against UCLA, that was the game that ends all NCAA tournament hopes. But though it may be unrealistic, with the opportunities left on the schedule, there is a path to an at-large bid. And I don't think they'll get it, but it's still there. And, as fans, we can dream, right? We can at least hope that Indiana can participate in some way, shape, or form in this year's iteration of March Madness. So there's your midweek motivation. And there's kind of a second part to this. Not to Rick Pitino, but I've got another clip that I want to show you. And this one, I'm going to present the visual element to you as well, because here's what I'm going to show you. Micah Shrewsberry, head coach of the Notre Dame Fighting Irish. He also, this isn't a motivational halftime speech. This is a post-game press conference, and I'm going to play the final few seconds of what he said, just kind of about himself. And again, similar to the Pitino clip, I'm just going to let this one do the talking. And there's something that happens at the very end of this clip that is the reason I'm showing you the visual element, if you haven't seen this already. So I'm going to let that roll right here.
I don't care about anybody's opinion. I know who I am. I know I can coach basketball. And I know I'm turning this program around. So you gave up on me already? I'm going to see you back here. I don't give a damn. Don't give up on these kids, because we're going to get this thing rolling. I sat there and watched more Louisville fans in here than Notre Dame people, and that's embarrassing. That's embarrassing for me, because I'm the head coach here. And yes, I got us in this predicament. But don't come back when we're losing or when we're winning, because we're turning this around, man. You better believe that. Everybody that gave up on me, believe it. Write this date down and believe it. Because we're going to get this thing rolling. I don't care if you gave up on me or not.
I mean, my goodness, right? He knocks the microphone over after, Notre Dame is not having the season that they would like to be having. And I believe this is year 2, maybe year 3 of Micah Shrewsberry being at the helm. And this was after a recent loss to Louisville where they got ransacked on their home floor. And Louisville last year, of course, we all know how they were last year. Notre Dame went into the Yum Center and completely dismantled a poorly coached Kenny Payne team. And I'm sure it was to Micah Shrewsberry's distress that things didn't work out, in a similar fashion on their own home floor this year. And kind of shows, I guess, lack of progression for his team. And, people are kind of giving up on the Irish. And it's very easy for fans to give up on teams nowadays whenever you look at how quickly things can be turned around. I think some programs have to be more patient than others, and I would think Notre Dame basketball falls into that category because football is always going to be number one there, and they're going to prioritize that program over the other. And you're getting over you just lost a legendary head coach in Mike Bray. Again, while I'm sitting here defending Micah Shrewsberry in some way, shape, or form, I feel like I need to look up how long he's been there, pulling up his Wikipedia page. So yeah, this is his. Oh, this is mine. Why is it showing me his? There we go. So I forgot he was head coach at Penn State. For some reason, I thought he was hired at Notre Dame as an assistant out of Penn State. I don't know why I thought that. So he's proven it at a difficult school in a difficult conference that he can have good seasons. Now, he was only at Penn State for 2 years. He had a losing record in his first season, and he was 23-14 in his second year. Got them to the round of 32, which Penn State doesn't get in the NCAA tournament very often. And to not only get there and then win a game while they're there, that's pretty big. That's a pretty big accomplishment, I should say, for Penn State. And at Notre Dame so far, he was 13-20 in year 1, currently 11-14 in year 2. Of course, not ideal. And I'm sure I would assume, unless the bottom falls out for them this year, especially they're playing in a very weak ACC conference. So that doesn't really bode well for Shrewsberry. But I would think if he can finish strong, he may get one more season at Notre Dame. And I know I like Shrewsberry. I know he's an Indiana guy. I believe he's from my old hometown of Jeffersonville, Indiana. So would like to see, would always wish someone the best in that regard. But who knows? He may be 2 and done at Notre Dame, and that would be unfortunate. But I just thought it was worth sharing that video because of the flip out, the knocking over the microphone. You don't see head coaches do that very often. It does remind me of earlier in the football season when almost said Les Miles. That's not the current LSU head coach. Brian Kelly. Again, his was way more fake. Brian Kelly, anytime he shows emotion, it's just so weird. But it's whenever he slapped down after they lost to USC, it's almost like it was fake anger. I don't know. Brian Kelly, just one of the corniest dudes in college football. Just reminded me of that because that was genuine anger. What Shrewsberry just did during that Notre Dame postgame press conference. But yeah, that's what I wanted to start the show with. I don't know. I saw those things and I was trying to figure out the best way to incorporate that into today's content. And I just got to a point where I was like, you know what? Today's show is just kind of going to be all over the place, and it's going to go in directions that we normally don't go in. And I think that's okay, especially for a show or in a day like today. And we're going to go over some YouTube comments here in a little bit as well. But before that, first of all, one more piece of news that I want to get into. And as I'm doing that, I'm going to be pulling up a schedule to also provide a quick little update. And this is from the Indiana baseball front. First of all, Indiana baseball off to a not so hot start. Last time we talked, I don't think they had played Oregon State just yet, but they went 0-3 in that, or excuse me, 0-4, because they also lost to UNLV on Monday. Not an ideal start for Indiana for this baseball season. And I know when they play in those tournaments down south, it's usually going to be against really good competition. You hope to win a couple of those games. You definitely don't want to get swept, but that's exactly what happened. But the reason I'm bringing up Indiana baseball right now, their game has been canceled for, I guess it would be today by this point of the show's release. I guess that gives. I'm recording this portion of the show once again the day before. The segment with Drew Rosenberg will have been recorded on Wednesday. That's also why the show is not getting released until the afternoon, as opposed to the early morning slot when things get released when I record on the day before. Usually, hopefully, all that made sense. But Indiana baseball, their game against Purdue Fort Wayne canceled due to weather. Hopefully all of you all are staying safe wherever you may be located, dealing with yet another fairly intense winter storm that is making its way across the Midwest, southern Midwest, whatever you want to call it. Heck, I don't even know where the majority of all of the precipitation and stuff's going. I just know it's reaching as far south once again as my neck of the woods. So hopefully you're staying safe. Hopefully Indiana will be able to get back on track soon. They'll be back in action this weekend in Cary, North Carolina. I don't know if this tournament has a name, but they will face a Big Ten team in a non-conference matchup. They'll face Northwestern on Friday, and then they'll have Fordham and Harvard on Saturday and Sunday. Don't know anything really about any of those teams, but I would think that this would be a good opportunity for Indiana to make up for the unfortunate, I hate to call it a poor showing, because two of those losses came in extra innings. One was just a shutout, unfortunately, to Oregon State, and then your other one was a 4-2 loss to UNLV. But it would be a good opportunity for Indiana to begin swinging things in their more so in their favor. I guess I was going to say no pun intended, but we can say the pun's intended. Pun's always intended on this show. So don't you forget that. If I'm ever making a pun and I say no pun intended, correct me. The pun is always intended here on In Touch with Indiana Sports. But with that being said, that gets through the majority of little pieces of news that I want to get through today. And then I'll go and transition now into our segment with Mr. Drew Rosenberg of HoosierIllustrated.com. And on the other side, I'll get to your YouTube comments. That's going to take up the rest of our show. There's a lot of comments I want to get to. Some of them more in-depth than others. Some of them more just funny things I want to mention. You guys send in some good stuff, at least in my opinion. So we'll get to that, and then we'll wrap up things after that. So let's go ahead and discuss a little bit of NBA All-Star nonsense, as well as Indiana basketball with one Drew Rosenberg of HoosierIllustrated.com. Joining me now from HoosierIllustrated.com, it is Drew Rosenberg once again. Welcome back to In Touch with Indiana Sports, my friend.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's always, it's always great to be on and, talk some basketball with you.
Yeah, and we're going to get into a couple of different things. Of course, I do want to start with some NBA All-Star reaction, just because that's not something I typically do during my solo segments. So it's something that I'll give a bit of a fresh perspective on. But you told me when we scheduled this conversation once again that you had some strong thoughts on the new NBA All-Star format. Did it work? Did it not work? I heard I can't remember. I think it was Anthony Edwards. He had some negative thoughts to say about this new mini tournament that they did. And honestly, before I hand it over to you, I think the NBA All-Star game it's kind of run its course. For some reason, I feel like really All-Star games in general, minus the Major League Baseball All-Star game for some reason, I feel like all of the other ones are afterthoughts nowadays. The only one that I feel like most people get genuinely excited for, and maybe it's primarily for the Home Run Derby, is the MLB All-Star game. But with that being said, I want to hear your thoughts on what the NBA is trying to do with their new format.
Yeah, I mean, the new formats, I think it's awful. I really hate it. I think the players, they've kind of been very open about it. Draymond Green got caught a lot of slack for talking about the Rising Stars being the fourth team. and then playing on All-Star Sunday night, which I completely agree with. They have not earned the right to be there. Playing on Sunday night of the All-Star weekend, that's a privilege. It's a lot of work. It's only 24 players get to do that each year. And it's watering it down. And I really hate the new format. I was open to the idea. Just the execution wasn't great. I really didn't like I don't know if you saw the Mr. Beast stuff. Mr. Beast had like his contest in the middle of the game. And it's like, if you're going to do that on All-Star Saturday night. You're risking injuries. Like, you're asking players to stop for 20 minutes and then restart with no warm-up. It's a joke. All-Star Saturday night is kind of broken too. It's the NBA All-Star Game's in shambles, and I don't know how you fix it because these players don't care. And, why would they care? They have no reason to. There's no, incentive for them to play hard.
I was trying to figure this out the other day, and I didn't dig too deep into it. I figured maybe you would have the answer potentially. But when do you feel like this shift into players not really trying in the All-Star game, it kind of becoming less of a big deal? When did that really begin, you think?
It's hard to say. I'd say it's in the last 10 years, but the problem is it's All-Star weekends for kids. When you really look at it, to get the kids excited, the dunk contest, the three-point contest, that's the stuff the kids want to see. You want to see the dunks, the half-court shots, and it's cool, but at the same time, it's, it's not basketball, and it's like, it's kind of the too cool for school type attitude. With you see some of the players like, yeah, I'm not going to try. I'll throw up this, 50-foot shot, and like, I'll do that, but that's about it in the game, and it's, it's just not even watchable at this point. And I've seen suggestions, you make home court advantage in the finals based off it, and, that might help, but at the same time, that only really affects a handful of players who are playing in the game. So I really don't know the fix. And I saw someone kind of blame LeBron a little bit for it. And I don't think LeBron's completely at fault, but it used to be, like the dunk contest specifically, the best players would do it. Jordan, Vince Carter, like the best players at the top of their game would do it. And LeBron was the first guy really just not to do it, despite being like one of the most athletic players ever. And now you've kind of seen it to where, look at the dunk contest this year. You have two rookies, a G Leaguer. A G Leaguer is a 3-time champ now of the dunk contest. Nothing against Mac McClung. Mac McClung is unbelievable athlete. He's one of the best dunkers maybe ever. But again, it shows you kind of where the NBA has gone on All-Star weekend, and it's a problem. And you look at the NHL, for example. The NHL, there's 4 nations. I don't know if you've seen some of this.
Yes, I've been keeping up with it. I haven't watched any of the games, but that's felt like a really big deal as opposed to what the NBA's been doing.
Yeah, it's all, like the players care, and it's like, yeah, this is, an exhibition tournament or whatever for them. I don't know if you saw the USA-Canada game. 3 fights in the first 9 seconds of the game. They want it. They care. And I've seen some suggestions. One of my friends kind of talked to me about this one, which would be cool, a USA versus international game. The U.S. would probably get smoked if you look at it, because you look at the top, 5 players in the league. The last 6 MVPs aren't born in America. But something like that where, there's maybe some pride involved, because there isn't that anymore.
Yeah, one thing, I don't know, this kind of reminded me of what the MLS, I don't know if they still do this, and this is you probably didn't expect me to bring up Major League Soccer, but their All-Star game used to be, they would take the best players, put it on one team, and they would face, again, one of the international clubs. Because, again, we all know Major League Soccer, the talent level is nowhere near what the talent level on one team from over in Europe is. So when you can put the best of the best in America together, you almost kind of have a shot against one of those teams from over in Europe. The one caveat being, you oftentimes would play, it didn't matter if it was, Real Madrid or, Barcelona, whoever it could have been, they weren't always playing their best guys. So even though it was cool to see maybe the MLS All-Stars do something against a European team, you knew it wasn't really the real deal because you weren't even getting their best. So maybe there isn't a true, fix-all solution to something like this. And I don't really know if it would be beneficial to eliminate the All-Star game altogether. I doubt that will ever happen. But at the same time, I said this earlier, I can't remember if it was on this show or a previous show. It just feels like a big handful of NBA players just kind of half-ass everything. And I know that's coming from somebody who doesn't play professional basketball, it doesn't mean a whole lot. But that's just kind of how it feels like the product has been reflected, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think basketball is kind of one of those sports that if you are very good at what you do, it almost becomes, not cool to try. And there's kind of been that mentality around it for as long as I can remember, where like if you're playing pickup with someone who's, significantly better than you, they're not trying because it's like, oh, I don't want, like, I'm too good to try in this game. And it's kind of feels like the All-Star game is in that similar spot. And it's how do you get these players to care? I've seen people talk about financial incentives, maybe a couple $1,000,000 to the winning team, stuff like that could be interesting. But then again, I mean, these players are already making so much money. I don't know if that's going to get them to play that much harder. And it's the big thing, I think, is when you like compare it to the MLB All-Star game, like injuries in baseball, it's a lot less contact. So it's a lot less of a chance you're going to get hurt in that MLB All-Star game where you're especially in that game, you're only playing typically 3-4 innings at most. So with the NBA, I mean, you see these non-contact or freak injuries, just like in the NFL, like obviously way more in the NFL. So it makes it hard where players are like, yeah, I don't want to risk it because, what happens if I get hurt and my team's chances for the remaining part of the year.
Last NBA question I want to ask you, and I'm sure you saw this, and if you didn't, forgive me for setting you up for failure here, but what do you think of Draymond Green and him claiming that now they have Jimmy Butler, that Golden State's on the road to win the title? Maybe it was all just for show, but it was still kind of funny that he did that on NBA on TNT.
Yeah, I mean, he has to say that. He has to say he thinks they can win a title. I mean, you can't go in and be like, yeah, I don't think we have a chance. Like that, players are never going to do that. But I do like Jimmy Butler on the Warriors. I think it's a really, fun combo with him and Steph. Just like Jimmy Butler's whole career has been the focal point on a team. He's never had been a secondary guy. And now he gets to be that with the greatest shooter of all time. So he's going to have a lot more space to play. And it's going to be really interesting just to see how they kind of mesh down the stretch.
I want to transition now to talk about some Indiana basketball. And, of course, it's been a bit of a layover type of week leading up to the Purdue game that'll take place on Sunday. And it kind of feels like this is Indiana's last stand, at least when it comes to whether or not they can make the NCAA tournament. I told Kyler the other day that I kind of thought the UCLA game was it, but I'm not saying Indiana's going to do this. I'm sure as heck not predicting it, but there's always that possibility. If you can rattle off these last 5 games and figure out, put together a winning streak going into the Big Ten tournament, yeah, maybe you find yourself on the right side of the bubble, but that means you have to beat Purdue this Sunday. So just kind of your overall thoughts on where this team's at. Do you think it's probable in any way that they can make this type of run and that sort of thing?
Probable, I'd say no, just because based on what I've seen, they just haven't shown me they can play with any consistency. But the bubble line this year is so weak. I mean, Indiana normally would be, their tournament chances would probably be over by now, just like it was last year. Like this team on paper is very similar to last year's team when you look at where they are at this point in the year. And last year's team was dead in the water at this point. I think they rattled off 5 straight wins to close the year. But this year, the way the bubble is and how weak it really is, because it's partly because of how strong the top of the top of the field is. There is a chance Indiana could sneak in. I think when you look at their schedule, they have 5 games left. I think I don't want to call Purdue a must win, but you really need to win that one. Ideally, win 4 of those 5 and then 2 in the Big Ten tournament. I think if Indiana gets to, I think they're at 15-11 now. If you get to 21 wins, I think they have a good chance to get in. But again, they've shown me nothing to make me believe they can get to that mark.
Yeah, and that's fair to say. But one thing I do recall from last year, Indiana had a very similar up and down inconsistent season. But when their backs were against the wall, I don't remember how many games they won in a row heading into the conference tournament, but they showed that they could string together some wins. Now, again, it remains to be seen. So it's kind of hard to talk about something that hadn't happened other than thinking about how they did it last year. And you do have a couple of guys from that team last year that were crucial to that run, of course, with Trey Galloway, Anthony Leal, and Malik Renew, those type of guys. And really, a lot of these players, this is their final season of eligibility. And, of course, it's Mike Woodson's last time head coaching, at least with Indiana. I know he's said to retire, but that doesn't mean he can't step into some other role in some way, shape, or form down the line if he got bored not coaching basketball in some way. But this is a lot of pieces to this current Indiana basketball puzzle, whether they fit together nicely or not. This is a lot of their last chance to do anything.
Yeah, I mean, they're going to fight. When your back's against the wall, it's kind of make or break for them. And we've seen at times, like, they can fight. I mean, we've seen them get down in holes and battle back. UCLA was another one of those games, just came up short. But it's starting games, and it's, they're going to fight, and they've shown they can fight. But their inability to start games on the right foot has killed them all season long. And until they can fix that, I don't know if there's anything this team really can do to make me believe, they can make this run to the tournament.
With that being said, I haven't had a chance to talk or pick your brain about who you would maybe want to see as the next Indiana men's basketball coach. And then, of course, there's different tiers to this. There's who's the home run hire, who do you think is more realistic, and who's maybe kind of a risk for Indiana that could maybe pay off, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I'll give you a couple names. I'm going to start with the obvious choice. My personal hope for the list, I hope it's Scott Drew. I don't know if you're able to get him out of Baylor, but I think he's early 50s, so he's younger than you'd think considering he's been at Baylor 20 years. He's built that program from the ground up. And they're having not their best season, so it's maybe you could lure him in with the money and all this stuff. Not sure if, he would ever leave.
Hold on, I do want to pause you right there because I have not had the chance to ask anyone about this. People talk about, he's not having a great season at Baylor. Then why is that? Why is he an attractive coach at Indiana? He won a championship whenever it was the COVID season, right? The season after COVID, I should say. And since then, he's been kind of meh. And I'm not saying he can't get it done in a regular type of season, but when he's kind of below average or at least right at average at Baylor right now, why would that give Indiana fans hope that he can maybe get back to the elite level of success? Bloomington?
Yeah, but when I'm saying it's, an year for Baylor, it's an year for Baylor. And they're having a better year than what Indiana is right now. And, a bad year there with, the lack of resources compared to what is available in Indiana. You've seen what Scott Drew can do. He can build teams. He's, I think, 5 Sweet 16 appearances and I think 3 Elite 8 appearances in the last 15 years. That's something Indiana really hasn't seen. He's, a proven guy. He can do it. And I think with the resources and Baylor's, having a little trouble competing on the NIL front, they're still landing these top guys, but it's a big part of Scott Drew is one of the best coaches in the country. And I think that helps. And I think him, going to Indiana, he'd have, the resources in his back pocket to help him really succeed here.
Who's a couple more that are on your radar, and then we'll wrap this thing up?
Mick Cronin, I think, is another guy, some Midwest ties, has been successful at UCLA, Cincinnati, everywhere he's been, maybe not as great recently, but with the NIL Indiana has to offer, same thing as Scott Drew. And then my kind of sleeper name that if you can't get a Dusty May or any of these other big names, Ben McCollum from Drake.
Yeah, there we go. I wish I had a bell right now. I'd be dinging it really, really hard if I had one with me. There we go. McCollum.
I think I talked to Kyler about this maybe a month ago before the Woodson news even broke. I was like, if we don't go, big name, Ben McCollum, someone to watch, because, the recruiting part's a little unknown going from D2 to D1, but the dude can coach.
And we've all seen how that works at the football level. Everyone that I've seen, whether it be in the YouTube comment section or just talking with, this is kind of maybe not the exact same scale, but it's kind of the Kurt Signetti hire for Indiana basketball if Indiana decided to go that route.
Yeah, and McCollum's young. I mean, he's a winner. As proven, he won it won a ton of the D2 level. First year at Drake, I don't know Drake's exact record, but they're on fire. Probably going to make the tournament this year. He's going to get a job, probably a high major job this year. It's just a matter of really where.
Drew, appreciate your time as always. I'll let you go. Enjoy the rest of your week, and we'll talk again soon.
Yeah, thanks, John.
Big thanks to Drew Rosenberg, as always, for his insight on the NBA, the Hoosiers, and everything in between. So always a pleasure to have Drew on the show. And with that, we'll go in and get into our final segment, if you will, of the day, of the week. Going to get into some YouTube comments. And you all sent anything and everything. You all sent things about Indiana. You all sent things about me. about other things, and I kind of want to address all of it. And some of you sent multiple comments, and even if you did, I normally try not to read more than one comment from the same person, but I'm in a mood right now to where I just want to let it all out there. We're letting our hair down, so to speak. I almost used a term that was a little more inappropriate than letting our hair down, but hey, we'll just leave that at that and move on. So starting with Mr. Tanis Half Elvin, I'll go ahead and mention this. The first 4 comments are from Tanis, and they're all unique, which is why I'm going to mention all of them. But first thing he mentions is he decided to point out the 5 head that I've got, and obviously I got a fresh cut going on right now. Some may think it looks horrible. Some might think I should have some longer hair, whatever it may be. But man, I think Tanis, you're the first person to ever at least directly mention that I've got a 5 head going on. But I think you're absolutely right. I don't know if it's just the way that the camera is angled, because I am kind of sitting lower than where the camera is perched up. So maybe that, it's more pointed directly at my forehead than I would like it to be. But hey, I've got to live with the 5 head. Thank you for bringing it to my attention. Because here's the thing. I don't know if I've mentioned this before. I think I've mentioned it on our other show, Out of Touch. But whenever I was younger, and not that I'm old, but whenever I was a guy with some, before the hairline started receding, I used to have what my family so lovingly called the barcode haircut. And it's honestly, it's exactly what you would think it would look like. So yeah, Tanis, thanks for pointing that out, and appreciate the other comments that I'm going to read in just a second. He also says, "In touch is like a box of chocolates. You never know when it's going to drop." That's also 100% true. We've been all over the place, really, for the last several weeks. I don't remember the last time I've really had a consistent schedule for recording, and that's just the way things go sometimes. It's just like Rick Pitino said, right? Can't complain, just keep moving. Life isn't, life's always going to throw you adversity. We just have to learn to deal with it. I don't think that's exactly what he said, but he said something along those lines. He also mentioned, Tanis once again says, "Did you outgrow Molly Hatchet?" Because I believe you're referencing when I said I outgrew the Daytona 500 or NASCAR or something like that. And Justin Beard replied to that comment saying, "Molly Hatchet rules. Great guitar player." So I got to admit this something real quick. And I know I fancy myself as somebody who loves rock music, but there are certain bands that I'm not as educated on as others. And one of those would be Molly Hatchet. So I'm sure I've just let some of you down, especially Mr. Beard. And I'm sure Tanis as well. So here I had to look up Molly Hatchet because I didn't know what you were referring to. But once I saw that it was a band, it did register with me like, okay, I think I knew this. I'm just not familiar with any of their songs, at least by name. It may be one of those things where if I heard the song in passing, I would recognize it, just not knowing it was a Molly Hatchet song. But so I guess I can't really say that I ever outgrew Molly Hatchet if I never knew who Molly Hatchet was in the first place. And then his final comment, he says, "My fondest memories of Daytona involve back-to-back years of a dude driving a blue car that totaled his ride and hopped out and waved at the crowd." See, something else that I'm not. Is this a Dale Earnhardt thing or a Jimmy Johnson thing? Yeah, I guess this is, maybe I'm making myself look stupid here, but that's just it's just the way this show goes sometimes. This show's kind of all over the place, and some of you, I hope you're enjoying it. I hope you're enjoying it. But let's continue on, and we'll get into a larger variety of comments. Sherry Lane says, "Have a great baby moon." Thank you, Sherry. Full disclosure, that's my mother. Appreciate you watching and commenting as well. Jamie Howie, here we go. Getting back on the track of what I think many of you would love to hear more about, and that is Indiana basketball. Jamie Howie says, "I think IU would be leery about Bruce Pearl he's referring to, for 2 reasons. Aside from his age, I believe there is a succession plan in place at Auburn for his son. I don't think IU would want to honor that, and it would be a deal breaker for Pearl to IU. Yeah, first of all, that is true. There is some sort of succession plan in place. I don't know exactly what it is, but I do know there is something like that for him at Auburn. And I don't want to say I fully agree with that with your statement that IU would not be on board with that, because well, I don't know. There's definitely, by the way, if you hear a baby crying, by the way, I know many of you know my wife is pregnant. This is not our child. The baby did not pop out early. My wife is babysitting her cousin's child right now. I'm not sure if the baby screaming is coming through on the microphone, but just wanted to point that out before somebody else did. But back to Jamie's comment about Bruce Pearl. I do think there is some truth to that, but I mean, if you can get some good years with Bruce Pearl, is it worth giving his son a chance? And maybe Bruce Pearl's the kind of person that would, and again, I'm just throwing this out there. Don't know this to be fact or not, and who would know? But maybe Bruce Pearl would be willing to not make that a part of his deal at Indiana. Because here's the thing: what if Bruce Pearl were to leave Auburn? And again, maybe this probably wouldn't work out this way now that I'm saying it out loud. For some reason, it made more sense in my head. But if Bruce Pearl were to leave Auburn, what if he was like, hey, you can, have my son instead? It'll be just like having me. I'm going to go coach at Indiana. I don't think that's how it would work, because I'm sure Auburn would feel betrayed at that point. Maybe not. But I think there is some level of possibility of that happening, right? Maybe I'm wrong, but here's the thing: if that's part of the succession plan with Auburn, see, now I'm making it make sense to me. Then if Bruce Pearl leaves, then it can still just be as it always was. That he can hand the coaching job over to his son, and Auburn doesn't have to do, a big wild coaching search. If this is the plan all along, then why not just give it the job to his son a little bit earlier? But maybe that's just wishful thinking on my part. Thank you for the comment, Jamie. Kevin Bratcher says Indiana needs to call Scott Drew. He might be interested. Yeah, I can't remember if you or somebody else have already mentioned that once or twice. I think Indiana probably will call Scott Drew. I don't really know if he'll ever leave Baylor. Maybe this would be the job they would leave Baylor for. But you're also getting Scott Drew when he's kind of not really. Yeah, he has a national championship during the COVID season, but since then he's kind of been mediocre. He had a good year right afterward, but I think they bowed out of the tournament early that season, if I remember correctly. And then since then, they've been good, but not great. And this year they're definitely good, but not great. So, but again, maybe that's what Scott Drew needs to kind of rejuvenate his career at this point. So, he's been at Baylor for a very, very, very long time, and maybe a change of scenery would get him back to his more elite ways of coaching. But who knows? We'll see. I tend to lean more toward he will not go with, taking an Indiana offer if he is indeed given one. Thank you for the comment, Kevin. Justin Beard, once again, he says, I am very glad. Okay, so he's referring to my Zelda coffee mug. I don't have it with me at the moment, but he says, I am very glad that you are a Zelda fan, John. The Hyrule mug is nice. I am not, and he goes on to say something not related to the Zelda mug. He says, I am not getting my hopes up about getting these big dream names. Good for you, because I'm trying not to do that either. He says, I think either way, the IU athletic department needs to take a risk. Taking Mike Woodson was a risk. It definitely felt like more of a risk than someone like an Archie Miller. Archie Miller, people were very confident that he would get the ball rolling with Indiana. He was one of the few rising stars on the market that year that a lot of people wanted. Him and Chris Mack, both who went to, of course, Indiana and Louisville respectively, one being way more successful than the other during their tenure. But I think every hire has a risk in some way, shape, or form attached with it. Just the level of risk is what you really have to consider. Because like Chris Beard, we know he's a great coach, but the risk is his off the court stuff. Scott Drew, he kind of seems like the plain Jane guy. I know we just mentioned him, but the risk right there has excuse me, and I know Scott Drew also and Chris Beard. I don't know if they fall under the, like, they're under the big dream names that you're talking about. Excuse me. But Scott Drew, like, maybe the risk is that his best days are already behind him. Ben McCollum, the risk is, can he produce wins at the same rate that he is right now at a bigger school? And we all know who that sounds like. I've said it a million times. But I also think, knowing that the football risk worked with Curt Cignetti, I think that makes going with a risky hire that has a high ceiling, like someone like a Ben McCollum. I'll keep saying his name because I do think that there could be some legs there. Not in that there's movement with his name being considered, but I think there could be some value there to Indiana if they decide to go that route. And but yeah, that's I hope I circled back around to my point correctly. But I think I'm with you, Mr. Beard, in that Indiana should think more unconventionally, or at least not be afraid to go the unconventional route. And I don't think they will be. I do think they'll toss money at big names. I just don't know the likelihood in which those said big names will, genuinely think about accepting the position. And then, excuse me, all of a sudden, very belchy, trying to hold it in as we get towards the latter portion of the show. Let me hit that cough button real quick. All right, sorry, my apologies. Let's get into this final comment. This is from Mike Shenanigans. This is as I get a hair out of my mouth. This is the comment I referenced that I was going to say for a rainy day, Mr. Shenanigans. And he said, this was back on episode 79. One thing he mentions on here is, wow, 79, the year I graduated. Very nice of you to include that. He says, and this was in reference to my Black Sabbath comments after I mentioned I was excited about them doing a reunion show. Shenanigans says, I went to an outdoor jam many moons ago, and Black Sabbath was one of the bands there. Crazy times. There was a Jeep driving around the parking/camping area with no top on, and there was two ladies sitting on top of the back seats holding on to the roll bars with no top on either. I guess I just dated myself there. Yep, that's definitely, I don't want to say that's unheard of nowadays, but the 70s, and I'm sure even more so in the 60s, that is something that was far more commonplace. And not to say it's taboo nowadays, but of course, with all, society changes. But I appreciate you sharing that, Mr. Shenanigans. And I'll be sure to let you know what I think of the reason I say this is because I think they're going to televise it. I'll let you know what I think of that Black Sabbath show whenever it happens in July. That's, as you said many moons ago, that is many moons from now. And it will be a few moons before I'm back again, because we are going to wrap up this show and I'm going to skedaddle out of here before I get too wordy, before I keep on talking way too much, because sometimes I can get to rambling. And I think we're going to try to exit this week with some grace, shall we? And we'll be back. I should be back on Sunday afternoon, excuse me, in time for a Indiana basketball postgame wrap-up show, as the Indiana Hoosiers will take on Purdue to potentially kickstart the final few games of their season, or if they lose, it'll, be the final nail in the coffin, if you will. But we can try to stay positive if we want. And then we'll be back on Monday for another edition of In Touch with Indiana Sports. A full week, I would hope, of In Touch with Indiana Sports. But until then, hit that subscribe button if you haven't already. Would greatly appreciate it. Hit that notifications bell if you want to know when every show is posted, any video from the site is posted, all that good stuff. And as always, check out everything going on at HoosierIllustrated.com. We would all greatly appreciate it. And until this weekend, this has been another edition of In Touch with Indiana Sports, powered by HoosierIllustrated.com.